Russia says it is no longer coordinating operations with the U.S. over the previously designated deconfliction zones in Syria. The Russian Defense Ministry said the decision is a response to the U.S. downing of a Syrian fighter jet in the northern province of Raqqa. The ministry added that Moscow considers the U.S. attack a deliberate failure to fulfill its commitments under a bilateral agreement over the deconfliction zones. The deal was meant to avoid in-air incidents between Russian and U.S. warplanes in Syria. Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov blasted the U.S. shoot-down of the Syrian jet as an act of aggression. Ryabkov said the attack helped the terrorists that the U.S. claims to be fighting. The Syrian jet was downed while giving air cover to forces advancing on Daesh's positions. Marcus Papadopoulos is the editor of Politics First, joining us from London. You have two versions over here, and not to get into too much details, but Russia saying ultimately it should have followed protocol, the U.S. that is, and it should have sent a warning, which the U.S. says it has. Who do you think is right, and why is Russia saying that the U.S. actually, by doing this, is helping the terrorists on the ground?
Well, it was another loathsome act from what is a loathsome American administration. First and foremost, by the Americans shooting down this Syrian jet, constituted a violation of Syria's sovereignty, because let's not forget, Damascus, the Syrian government, has not given permission to American aircraft to operate in Syrian airspace. And what is even worse than that violation of Syria's sovereignty is that the Americans shot down a Syrian Air Force plane that had been bombing ISIS. That really serves as another reminder that the American government has strong ties to ISIS and indeed all the other Islamist Wahhabist terrorist groups in Syria. And contrast the American government or the American military shooting down of that Syrian jet with how Iran fired ballistic missiles at ISIS positions in Syria. It shows that on the one hand you have Russia and Iran and of course Syria, which are absolutely, resolutely committed to destroying Islamist Wahhabist terrorists in Syria. And on the other hand, you have the American government led by Trump, which is absolutely insincere when it says it is fighting terrorists. No. Let's not live under any illusion. The American government, led by Trump, is supporting ISIS.
You have incidents like this happening now on an almost repetitive mode, because this month, this, I believe, is the fourth time this has occurred. Russia now has said that they're not going to cooperate with the U.S. on its air activities. If this should follow with the question, then what if the U.S. does this again? What would happen then?
Well, firstly, last year and this year, I warned that when Trump entered the White House, the situation in Syria could very well take a turn for the worst, because Donald Trump has had intensive business ties with the Saudi royal family, which is the leading exporter of terrorism to the world for decades. And as you correctly said, since Trump took office, the Americans have directly attacked the Syrian military with 59 cruise missiles. And yesterday's shooting down of the Syrian Air Force jet, I believe, is the fourth time that the American military have targeted the Syrian military. So these are very, very worrying days. There's no question about it. There's no dispute in my mind that Donald Trump is a patron of Saudi Arabia, is a patron of Wahhabism. But what can Russia do in response? Well, Russia has played an absolutely crucial role in ensuring that the Islamist Wahhabist terrorist groups in Syria fail in their ambitions to topple the Syrian government. And of course, the Russians have ensured that the plans by the Americans and the British and the Turks and the Saudis and the Qataris to topple the Saudi government has failed as well. There's no question about that. The Syrian army will sooner or later prevail, which is not just a great thing for Syria, a great thing for the Middle East, but a great thing for the world, because every advance by the Syrian army is a blow to Wahhabist terrorism. But we also have to be brutally realistic. It pains me to say that Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia does not have the power of the Soviet Union. I ideally hope one day that Russia will have that Soviet-era power that it once had. So given that, Russia doesn't have that many options about how to respond to the American military when it targets the Syrian army or the Syrian Air Force. And we have heard the Russians say that they will no longer be coordinating their actions with the American Air Force over the skies of Syria, but they have said that before. They said that after Trump attacked Syria with 59 cruise missiles. So we can only hope that the Russian military, the Syrian military and the Iranian military will progress on the battlefield in Syria and keep on eliminating one terrorist after another terrorist after another terrorist, and keep on liberating Syrian territory from the tyranny of Wahhabist rule. But it's suffice to say, if the Soviet Union was still about today, then America would never have dared to touch Syria. And if somehow the Americans had started attacking the Syrian military, then no doubt about it, the Soviet military would have shot those American planes down. But as I said, sadly, Russia doesn't have the strength that it once had in Soviet times. But I hope that changes in the future. And if that does come, that will be a good thing for global peace and global security.
Thank you, Marcus Papadopoulos, editor of Politics First from London.